My daughter chose her wealthy stepfather and left me broken. Now she's broke and begging. But I gave her the ending that matched the pain she caused. I, a 50-year-old male, need to get this off my chest, and honestly, I'm still struggling with whether I'm making the right call here. This whole mess started about 12 years ago when I split with my ex-wife, Nicole, a 48-year-old female. But to understand why I'm at this crossroads now, you need to know the full story. Back then, I was literally working myself to the bone with 2 full-time jobs. We're talking 80-hour weeks, alternating between a day shift at a warehouse and evening shifts at a local restaurant. The economy wasn't great, and I was doing everything I could to keep our heads above water. Bills were always breathing down my neck: mortgage, utilities, car payments, you name it. I'd skip lunches sometimes just to make sure there was enough food on the table for my family. Nicole, though, was something else entirely. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags from the start, but you know how it is when you're in love and trying to make a marriage work. She came from a more privileged background, and no matter how hard I worked, she acted like I was somehow failing her by not providing the lifestyle she thought she deserved. You wouldn't believe some of the arguments we had. I'd come home exhausted after a double shift, and she'd be there with a jewelry catalog, circling things she wanted for her birthday. When I'd try to explain that we needed to budget carefully, she'd hit me with lines like, "My father would never have let his family live like this," or "I didn't marry you to live paycheck to paycheck." It was soul-crushing, honestly. We had a daughter together, Chelsea, now a 25-year-old female, and I really thought that would be our common ground, you know, that whole staying together for the kids thing. But instead of bringing us closer, Chelsea became another point of contention. Nicole would constantly undermine me in front of her, making comments about how daddy can't afford this or that, or how other kids at school had better things. I tried to teach Chelsea the value of money and the importance of hard work, but Nicole would roll her eyes and tell her not to listen to my poor person mentality. The real kicker? Despite all her complaints about money, Nicole wasn't exactly contributing much to our financial situation. She had a part-time job at a boutique, but most of her paycheck went to her personal expenses: designer clothes, salon appointments, lunch dates with her friends. Meanwhile, I was pulling double shifts and still getting grief about not providing enough. I remember this one incident that really captures what I was dealing with. It was Chelsea's 10th birthday, and I'd saved up for months to throw her a nice party at this local pizza place. Nothing super fancy, but it was clean, fun, and the kids loved it. Nicole spent the entire party making snide comments about how basic everything was, and how embarrassing it was that we couldn't afford to rent out that expensive indoor playground like Chelsea's classmate had done the month before. The stress was unreal. I started having anxiety attacks, which I'd never experienced before. My blood pressure was through the roof, and I was barely sleeping. The doctor told me I needed to reduce my stress levels, but how could I when every day felt like walking through a minefield of criticism and demands? I tried suggesting marriage counseling, thinking maybe if we could get on the same page about our finances and expectations, we could make it work. Nicole's response? The only counseling we need is financial counseling to figure out how you can earn more money. It was like talking to a wall that only echoed back demands for more. Looking back now, I can see how this toxic environment was setting the stage for everything that would follow: the constant pressure, the undermining, the materialistic values being instilled in Chelsea. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, but I was too caught up in trying to keep everything together to see where it was all heading. I guess what really gets me now, thinking back on all of this, is how I never felt like I was enough. No matter how many hours I worked, no matter how much I sacrificed, it was always painted as some kind of personal failing on my part. The narrative was never, "Dad works really hard to provide for us." It was always, "Dad can't afford what we deserve." Living with Nicole wasn't just difficult. It was like being stuck in an endless performance review where you're constantly being told you're not meeting expectations every single day. I'm talking about the kind of situation where you'd wake up already feeling like you'd failed somehow, and the day hadn't even started yet. Let me give you some specific examples, since many of you asked for more details. One time, I remember coming home after a particularly rough 14-hour workday. I'd picked up an extra shift because Nicole had emergency shopping to do. I walked through the door to find shopping bags from high-end stores scattered across our living room. The credit card bill for that month ended up being over $3,000, money we absolutely didn't have. When I tried to talk to her about it, she looked at me like I was speaking an alien language and said, "Well, Chelsea needed new clothes for school. Want to know what these needed items were? A $400 designer backpack. Because apparently the perfectly good one from last year was embarrassing. 3 pairs of shoes from some brand I couldn't even pronounce, because all the other moms get their kids the right brands. And get this, she'd bought herself a matching designer purse because she couldn't let Chelsea be the only one with nice things. The real kicker? When I pointed out that this would mean I'd have to pick up even more extra shifts to cover the bill, she actually said, "Well, maybe if you had a better job, I wouldn't have to feel guilty about buying basic necessities." Basic necessities, that's what she called a $400 backpack. Eating out was another constant battlefield. If I suggested a family restaurant, Nicole would make this face. You know, the one where someone's trying to hide their disgust but wanting you to see it at the same time. She'd spend the entire meal making comments loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "I can't believe we're eating at a place with plastic cups," or "I guess this is what passes for atmosphere these days." One time, I'd saved up for 2 months to take her to a nice restaurant for our anniversary. It wasn't the fanciest place in town, but it was well reviewed and definitely above our usual budget. The moment we walked in, before we'd even been seated, she started in with, "Oh, this is where we're eating?" Then, throughout the entire meal, she kept pulling up Yelp on her phone, pointing out all the better restaurants we could have gone to instead. She even made a point of telling our waiter that it was our anniversary, then adding, "But apparently this is as good as it gets." The house was another constant source of conflict. We lived in a decent 3-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with good schools, but Nicole would give tours to her friends like she was showcasing a disaster area. And this is our cozy kitchen. We're planning to renovate as soon as someone gets a better job, or, sorry about the basic countertops, some people just don't understand the importance of granite. The worst part was how she'd involve Chelsea in her materialistic mindset. She'd take Chelsea window shopping at expensive stores, pointing out all the things Daddy can't afford to buy us. She'd encourage Chelsea to make wish lists of ridiculously expensive items, then act sympathetic when I had to explain we couldn't afford them. "I know, sweetie," she'd say. "I grew up having nice things too. Some people just don't understand our standards." Even basic household decisions became exercises in humiliation. When our washing machine broke down, I researched and found a reliable mid-range model that got good reviews. Nicole turned it into a 3-week drama, refusing to settle for anything less than some premium brand that cost 3 times as much. We ended up having to do laundry at her mother's house, who, of course, had the expensive brand, while Nicole told everyone who would listen about how I was forcing her to live without proper appliances. The constant comparisons to other families were exhausting. Every time one of Chelsea's classmates got something new, a phone, a laptop, a vacation, it became evidence of my failure as a provider. Nicole would casually drop into conversation how all the other dads managed to afford these things. She never seemed to consider that maybe those other families had dual incomes, different circumstances, or were drowning in debt to maintain appearances. Holiday seasons were particularly brutal. Nicole would spend weeks creating elaborate wish lists, then act martyred when I suggested we needed to stick to a budget. She'd tell Chelsea things like, "Well, honey, I guess we'll have to wait and see what Santa can afford this year," with this pointed look in my direction. One Christmas, she actually returned the thoughtful gifts I'd carefully chosen and saved for, declaring them not up to standard, and used the money to buy one expensive item instead. The thing that really gets me, looking back, is how she managed to make everything about status and appearance. Even family game nights or movies at home weren't immune. She'd spend the whole time on her phone, showing Chelsea pictures of what real families were doing with their evenings. The transformation in my daughter still haunts me. Chelsea, a 15-year-old female at the time, went from being this sweet kid who used to curl up next to me watching Star Wars and asking for piggyback rides to someone I barely recognized. The change wasn't overnight. It was like watching a flower slowly close, one petal at a time, until there was nothing left of the relationship we once had. The divorce was finalized when Chelsea was 14, and that's when Nicole's new boyfriend, Steven, entered the picture. Now let me paint you a picture of Steven, a 42-year-old male at the time. Imagine every stereotype of a midlife crisis wrapped in an expensive suit. The guy drove a bright red Ferrari, wore watches that cost more than my annual salary, and seemed to think throwing money around was a personality trait. I tried to keep things stable on my end. I had a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a decent area close to Chelsea's school. Every other weekend I'd plan activities I thought she'd enjoy, movie marathons, trips to the science museum she used to love, space, cooking her favorite meals together. But increasingly, these weekends became torture sessions of comparison. "Dad, why can't we go to Paris like Mom and Steven?" she'd ask, not even looking up from her phone during the movie I'd specially picked for our night together. "This apartment is so basic. Steven's house has a pool and a home theater." Every sentence started with comparisons to Steven's lifestyle and ended with implications of my inadequacy. The real gut punch came during what I thought would be a special father-daughter day. I'd saved up for months to take her to this Broadway show she'd been talking about. The tickets weren't front row, I couldn't afford that, but they were decent seats. I was so excited to surprise her. Know what she did? She looked at the tickets and said, "Oh, we're sitting in the mezzanine? Steven always gets box seats." Then she spent the entire show texting and making it clear how bored she was. Her 16th birthday was another nightmare. I'd saved up to buy her this really nice camera. She used to love photography and had even won a school competition the year before. When she opened it, she just stared at it like I'd handed her a brick. "Mom and Steven are getting me a car," she announced. A real present. The camera ended up in her closet, never used. Later I found out she'd tried to sell it online. The attitude at school events was humiliating. During parent-teacher conferences, she'd introduce Steven as her dad and pretend not to see me sitting there. At her school orchestra performance, she played violin. She made sure I sat in the back while Steven and Nicole got the prime seat she'd reserved. When I tried to give her flowers after the show, she literally turned her back on me and posed for photos with them instead. Every interaction became a transaction. She'd call or text and my heart would leap, thinking she wanted to talk. But it was always about money. "Dad, everyone's getting the new iPhone. Dad, I need $300 for this school trip. Dad, my friends are all going to this concert." When I couldn't afford these things, she'd hit me with guilt trips that felt scripted by Nicole. "I guess I'm just not worth investing in." Or, "Why can't you be successful like Steven?" The entitlement reached new heights when she started driving. Steven had bought her a brand new BMW for her 16th birthday. I couldn't afford to match that, but I tried to contribute by offering to pay for her gas. Instead of appreciation, I got complaints about how embarrassing it was to have to use regular gas instead of premium. She actually said, "Steven says premium gas is what successful people use." I guess you wouldn't understand that. The worst part was watching her internalize Nicole and Steven's materialistic values. She started treating her old friends differently based on their parents' income levels. This sweet girl who used to share her lunch with kids who forgot theirs was now making fun of classmates for wearing non-designer clothes. She'd come to my place for dinner and take photos of the food to send to her mom, adding sneering comments about how basic everything was. I tried everything to maintain our relationship. I went to therapy to learn better ways to communicate with teens. I picked up extra work to try to give her some of the things she wanted. I even swallowed my pride and asked Steven if we could all sit down together and talk about providing a united front for Chelsea's sake. His response? He laughed and said he'd handle the lifestyle department, and I should focus on whatever it is you can actually provide. Looking back, I realized I was losing her long before she actually cut me off. Every eye roll, every comparison to Steven, every disappointed sigh when I couldn't afford something. They were all little deaths of our father-daughter relationship. But even knowing that didn't prepare me for what came next. After months of Chelsea, a 17-year-old female at the time, dodging my calls and texts with increasingly ridiculous excuses, I finally managed to get her to agree to meet me for dinner. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. She suggested meeting at this ridiculously expensive restaurant, the kind of place Steven would take her to, instead of our usual diner. I think she knew I couldn't afford it, but I was so desperate to see her that I dipped into my emergency savings just to make it happen. I got there early, dressed in the nicest clothes I had, which, according to the looks from the staff, weren't nice enough. I waited at that table for 45 minutes past our agreed time, sending text after text, each one making me feel more pathetic than the last. When she finally showed up, she didn't even apologize for being late. She just sat down, looked at her phone, and said, "I can only stay for like 30 minutes. I have plans later." The waiter came by, and without even looking at the menu, she ordered the most expensive items she could find. I watched her tap away at her phone while rattling off dishes I knew would cost me nearly a week's worth of groceries. When I gently suggested we might want to look at some of the more reasonable options, she rolled her eyes and said, "God, Dad, this is why I hate coming out with you. It's always about money." That's when I tried to have the talk. You know, the one where you lay all your cards on the table and hope for some kind of breakthrough. I started telling her how much I missed her, how it hurt that she was constantly canceling our weekends together, how I felt like I was losing my little girl. Her response? She put her phone down, finally looked me straight in the eye and said with this cold smile, "You want to know the truth, Dad? I don't need you. You're always broke and can't give me the life I deserve. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a father who can't even afford to eat at nice restaurants without checking the prices first?" I sat there, stunned, as she continued, each word like a knife. "Steven takes me shopping and doesn't make a face when I pick something expensive. He gets me the latest iPhone without lectures about appreciating the value of money. He knows what it means to provide properly for a family." Then came the real bombshell. She reached into her designer purse, a gift from Steven, of course, and pulled out some legal papers. "I want you to sign these," she said, sliding them across the table like she was some kind of corporate executive closing a deal. "It's papers to terminate your parental rights. Steven wants to adopt me officially." I felt like I couldn't breathe. The restaurant, with all its fancy decorations and well-dressed patrons, started spinning around me. "Chelsea," I managed to say, "you can't be serious. I'm your father. I've been there since the day you were born. Remember all the times we—" She cut me off with this laugh that didn't sound anything like my daughter. "If you're not going to keep up with my lifestyle, then what's the point of having you as my dad? Stephen can provide everything you can't. Plus, it's not like you've been much of a father anyway. When was the last time you took me on a real vacation or bought me something without complaining about the price?" I must have sat there for what felt like hours just staring at those papers. They were already filled out, just waiting for my signature. The methodical nature of it all, how she'd planned this ambush, chosen this expensive restaurant knowing I'd be out of my element, prepared this speech. It broke something in me. "Chelsea, I tried one more time. Money isn't everything. I love you. I've always loved you. I've worked multiple jobs, missed sleep, skipped meals, done everything I could to provide for you. Maybe it wasn't enough for your standards, but it was everything I had to give." She stood up, grabbing her purse. "Love doesn't pay for designer clothes or luxury vacations, Dad. I need a father who can keep up with the lifestyle I deserve. Stephen can do that. You can't. It's that simple." Then, as if twisting the knife wasn't enough, she added, "Oh, and you can take care of the bill, right? Since this is probably the last dinner we'll have together, you wouldn't want to end it by being cheap." She walked out, leaving me sitting there with an expensive meal I hadn't even touched, and a stack of papers that essentially asked me to erase myself from my daughter's life. The waiter came by with the check and I handed over my credit card, knowing it would be declined. I had to call my brother to help pay for the meal. One final humiliation. I didn't sign those papers that night, but something else was signed and sealed. The death certificate of my relationship with my daughter. I sat in my car in that fancy restaurant's parking lot until 3 o'clock in the morning, crying like I hadn't cried since I was a child. That conversation with Chelsea broke something fundamental in me. You know those movies where someone gets hit and you can actually hear the bones cracking? That's what it felt like. Except the breaking was happening somewhere inside my chest, somewhere doctors can't reach with their instruments. The first week after, I couldn't even get out of bed. I called in sick to both jobs, using up what little paid time off I had saved. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Nicole, not because she cared, but because Chelsea had told her about the restaurant incident, and she wanted to discuss my selfishness in refusing to do what's best for our daughter. Each message was like another shovel of dirt on the grave of my former life. I started making mistakes at work, basic stuff that I'd never messed up before. At the warehouse, I kept misplacing orders. At the restaurant, I'd forget customers' orders or bring the wrong dishes. My managers were patient at first. I'd been reliable for years, but after the third time I nearly caused an accident with the forklift, they had to let me go. The restaurant followed suit a week later when I had a breakdown in the middle of a shift, sobbing over a plate of spaghetti because it was Chelsea's favorite dish I used to make for her. The job losses started a domino effect. Without income, I couldn't make rent. My landlord was understanding at first, but kindness has its limits when bills need to be paid. I had 2 weeks to clear out of my apartment, the same apartment where Chelsea's height marks were still penciled on the doorframe, where her old art projects were still stuck to the fridge with alphabet magnets. Here's the part I haven't told anyone until now. Not even my therapist knows the full extent of it. For 3 months, I was homeless. Not the kind of homeless where you're couch surfing at friends' places. I mean properly, genuinely homeless. I'd spend nights on subway platforms because they were warmer than the streets. During the day, I'd wander around the city, using the last of my phone data to apply for jobs while sitting in fast food restaurants, nursing a single coffee for hours just to stay somewhere warm. The worst part wasn't the physical discomfort, it was the shame. I'd duck into public bathrooms to wash up, wearing the same clothes for days because I couldn't afford laundry. I'd avoid eye contact with everyone, terrified I'd run into someone who knew me, someone who might tell Chelsea or Nicole about what had become of me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd finally become exactly what they'd always accused me of being: a failure. I hit my absolute lowest point one night when I was sitting in a 24-hour diner, counting change to see if I could afford a cup of soup. The TV was playing some entertainment news show, and there was Chelsea, my Chelsea, at some charity gala with Nicole and Stephen. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than I made in a month when I was working, talking about their recent family vacation to the Maldives. The interviewer asked about her family, and she gushed about how amazing her dad was. She meant Stephen, of course. I wasn't even a footnote in her story anymore. That night, I found myself standing on a bridge, looking down at the water below. I'm not proud of where my mind went, but I need to be honest about how dark things got. What stopped me wasn't hope or courage, it was a random stranger who happened to be walking by. He was a maintenance worker heading home from his night shift. He took one look at me and just knew. Instead of calling the police or trying to talk me down with platitudes, he just stood there and shared his sandwich with me. We didn't even talk much, but that simple act of human kindness saved my life that night. The next morning, I swallowed what was left of my pride and called my younger brother. He lived in another state, and we hadn't been close since I married Nicole. She'd always looked down on his blue-collar lifestyle. He didn't hesitate. He just said, "I'm coming to get you," and drove 6 hours to pick me up. My brother let me crash in his basement, but more importantly, he helped me find a therapist who worked on a sliding scale. Those first few sessions, I couldn't even speak. I just sat there and cried. The therapist suggested I start journaling, which felt stupid at first, but it helped me start processing everything. I also started going to the gym with my brother, not because I cared about getting in shape, but because it was somewhere to go, something to do that didn't involve thinking about Chelsea. There's something therapeutic about lifting weights when you're carrying that much emotional baggage. Every rep felt like lifting another piece of my old life, examining it, and choosing whether to keep it or let it go. Recovery isn't a straight line. That's probably the most important thing I learned during this period. Some days you're taking steps forward, and others, you're right back in that dark place, counting ceiling tiles in your brother's basement and wondering how your life ended up here. My brother, a 44-year-old male, was my saving grace during this time, though I didn't appreciate it enough at first. He'd wake me up every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning for the gym, even when I'd curse at him and try to pull the covers over my head. "The weights don't care about your problems," he'd say, "but they'll help you carry them." It became our routine. Lift, shower, job hunt, therapy, repeat. The first real victory came 3 months into living with him. I landed a job at a logistics company, nothing fancy, just entry-level work coordinating deliveries. The pay was modest, but it was steady, and more importantly, it was something I could build on. My boss, a 52-year-old male, was this gruff but decent guy who'd been through his own divorce hell. He saw something in me and started mentoring me in the business. That's when I met Rachel, a 46-year-old female. She wasn't some romantic comedy meet-cute. She was the HR representative processing my benefits paperwork. I must have looked completely lost trying to figure out the insurance forms because she offered to help me during her lunch break. We got to talking, and it turned out she was also divorced, with 2 kids. Here's the thing about Rachel that hit me hard. She didn't try to fix me. After Nicole's constant criticism and Chelsea's materialistic demands, Rachel's simple acceptance of who I was felt almost foreign. When I told her about my past, including the homeless period, which I was deeply ashamed of, she just listened. No judgment, no advice, just genuine empathy. Our first date was nothing fancy, just coffee at this little place near work. I was nervous about suggesting it, worried it wasn't upscale enough. But Rachel just smiled and said she loved their muffins. We sat there for hours talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her kids, a 14-year-old male and a 16-year-old female, her own divorce struggles, her dreams of maybe going back to school someday. The relationship developed slowly, organically. We'd have lunch together at work, then occasional dinners. She invited me to her son's baseball games, and I helped her daughter with math homework. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people healing together. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. I had massive trust issues and anxiety about money. The first time Rachel suggested splitting the bill on a date, I nearly had a panic attack. Years of Nicole's conditioning had me expecting judgment for not paying. Instead, Rachel just held my hand and said, "We're partners, not a balance sheet." 6 months into dating, Rachel's daughter, Emma, had a school dance. She needed help with her dress, and somehow, I ended up being the one helping her budget and shop for it. The moment she asked my opinion on colors, I started crying in the middle of the store. Emma just hugged me and said, "It's okay to miss her, but we're here now." That's when I realized I was part of a family again, just in a different way. Rachel and I got married last year. It was a small ceremony in her brother's backyard. Her kids stood up with us, Emma as her maid of honor, Jake as my best man alongside my brother. We wrote our own vows, and one of the promises we made was to always be honest about our brokenness and to help each other heal. We bought a modest house together, nothing fancy, but it's ours. The kids have their rooms, we have a small garden, and there's this weird creaky step that we keep saying we'll fix but never do. It's not perfect, but it's real. Every birthday, every holiday, every minor achievement is celebrated. Not with expensive gifts or fancy restaurants, but with genuine joy and presence. I still have my moments. Sometimes I'll see a father and daughter together at the store or hear Chelsea's favorite song on the radio, and it hits me all over again. But now I have people who understand that grief isn't something you get over, it's something you learn to carry differently. Then that day came. I was picking up groceries at Whole Foods. Ironic, I know, the store Chelsea used to mock me for not shopping at, when I literally ran into her. Chelsea, a 25-year-old female now, was standing in the wine aisle, looking exactly like a younger version of Nicole. Designer everything, that same entitled posture. For a moment I thought about pretending I hadn't seen her, but she spotted me first. "Hey Dad," she said with this practiced, casual tone. Like we'd just seen each other yesterday. Not like she'd spent the last 8 years pretending I didn't exist. I finally decided I need you back in my life. The shopping basket nearly slipped from my hands. 8 years of therapy helped me keep my composure, but inside, I was that broken man on the subway platform again. She kept talking, filling the silence with words that felt rehearsed. Stephen and Mom got divorced last year, she explained, examining a wine bottle like we were discussing the weather. Turns out he was cheating with his secretary. How cliché, right? But that's not why I'm here. She put the bottle back, picked up a more expensive one. I've been doing some thinking and I realized maybe I was a bit harsh back then. A bit harsh, that's how she described destroying her father's life. Then came the real reason for this sudden reunion. I'm starting my own business, she announced, a boutique PR firm. Mom's not in a position to help right now, and Stephen's new wife doesn't want him investing in past relationships. I thought maybe we could reconnect, father-daughter style. I stood there, grocery basket growing heavy in my hands, as she continued. I've got all the plans drawn up. The space I want is perfect, it just needs some renovation. We could spend time together while you help me get it started. Like financially, I mean. It would be a great investment opportunity for you. That's when something in me snapped, not in a breaking way this time, but in a moment of pure clarity. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw not just who she was, but who she'd always been since Nicole and Stephen molded her in their image. Chelsea, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I've moved on. I've built a life with people who respect me. I have stepchildren who value me for who I am, not what I can buy them. My other kids matter too. Her face did this thing I remember from her teenage years, that slight sneer that always preceded a cruel comment. What's the point of having you as dad if you can't support me like I deserve? The next day, she showed up at my mom's house, her grandmother, whom she hadn't spoken to in 8 years. My mom called me immediately, telling me how Chelsea had burst into tears, talking about how much she missed her family and needed support during this difficult time, but when Mom gently suggested that if Chelsea wanted to be part of the family again, it would need to start with genuine relationships, not financial support. Chelsea's tears dried up remarkably fast. She actually laughed and said, I'm only here for the lifestyle. If you can't give me that, then why bother? So here I am, Reddit. My daughter's back, but she's not really back. She just needs a new sponsor now that Stephen's gone. Part of me wants to help her. She's still my daughter, after all. But a bigger part remembers those nights on the subway platform, the therapy sessions, the slow process of rebuilding my self-worth. Am I the asshole for not wanting to let her back into my life, for choosing my mental health and my new family over my biological daughter? My wife, Rachel, supports whatever decision I make but says I need to make it for the right reasons. My therapist suggests maintaining firm boundaries if I do decide to reconnect. 1. Yes, Chelsea knows about my homelessness period. Nicole apparently told her during one of their fights with Stephen, using it as an example of why some people never succeed in life. 2. No, Stephen didn't adopt her. The papers never went through, though not for lack of trying on their part. 3. Yes, I've offered to have a relationship with Chelsea that doesn't involve money. Her response was, what would be the point of that? To those asking about Nicole's current situation, apparently Stephen had been moving assets around for years, preparing for the divorce. She got far less than she expected, and her expensive lifestyle isn't sustainable anymore. The irony isn't lost on me. My stepchildren have asked if they should reach out to Chelsea as potential siblings. I've advised against it. I don't want them exposed to that kind of toxic materialism. They've seen photos of her and know the story, but I've never spoken ill of her to them. They came to their own conclusions after hearing about her recent visit. After talking it over with my family and therapist, I've decided to send Chelsea one final email. I'll tell her that I'm open to having a relationship with her, but only if it's based on genuine connection, not financial support. The ball will be in her court. Given her response at Mom's house, I'm not holding my breath, but at least I'll know I tried one last time to be her father, not her banker.